Good evening, Somers, and welcome to our special meeting, very special meeting, Tuesday, January 14th. So if you would please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Did you see what that said?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and be seated.
It's hilarious. 3 weeks.
Well, it's not often this town board looks out at a group of so talented a group here.
Friendly, talented.
Well, I don't know about friendly.
But you're all volunteers, and we thank you for your service to the town. Very much appreciated. Patty, roll call.
Councilman William G. Faulkner.
Here.
Councilman Richard G. Clinton.
Here.
Councilman Anthony J. Sirico.
Here.
Councilman Thomas A. Garrity Jr.
Here.
Supervisor Rick Morrissey.
Present. Thank you. Okay, I want to start off by welcoming our boards and committees. Town of Somers Planning Board is with us this evening. Town of Somers Open Space Committee is with us. Town of Somers Architectural Review Board is represented. Energy and Environment Committee is represented. And is there anyone here from Westchester County Planning? No. Okay. And our town planner. Thank you. Okay, the first, so Saret, you want to just give an overview of the purpose of the special meeting, and then we'll call up our applicants?
We've been going through a process to finalize the applicants' what they are calling their project assessment, their volumes 1 and 2, as part of the review for their petition for a zone change and changes to the comprehensive plan. That's in the purview of the town board as lead agency. We've gone through many iterations of that. They have submitted different drafts in June, in September, in December, and the latest, which is January 2020. All of these are responding to comments that have been made by your staff, your consultants from Woodard and Curran, your traffic engineering consultants from FP Clark, and from meetings like this that have been held in November of 2018, in August of 2019, and this latest meeting to take comments on the items that were asked to be identified in this document. So we believe at the moment that this is a vast improvement of the earlier documents. We've invited everybody here tonight with the town board as lead agency to determine if this document, volumes 1 and 2, has actually completed answering all of the issues that have been raised, at least in terms of completeness. There will be a technical review that follows, and that's what we're here tonight to see what else different boards and the town board think about this, and whether the town board will determine that this should be completed by the applicant, maybe with some minor modifications, and if so, that it's available for public review and distribution, and then we can take the next steps in this process.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so at this time, I'd like to call up Mark Weingarten, representing Somers Academy team.
Good evening, Mr. Supervisor, members of the board, members of all the boards, and being here for the first time, Happy New Year. And we're looking forward to a great 2020 and some exciting things with regard to this project. As the supervisor said, my name is Mark Weingarten. I'm a partner in the law firm of Del Bello, Donnell, and Weingarten, Wise, and Wiedeker. And I am here this evening representing 294 Route 100 LLC and its agent Sebastian Capital, who is the landlord, as well as Evergreen Ridge LLC, the school which we're now calling officially Bluestone Peak, in connection with their request for the requisite town approvals to enable the development of a world-class for-profit boarding day STEM high school grades 9 to 12 on the property located at 294 Route 100, also known as the former IBM campus. We've been asked today to bring our entire team with us. They are virtually all here, as of course Roxana will be joining us in progress as always, but Caesar is here from Sebastian. We have our engineers and our architects and my partner, and we have our security expert, our wetlands people, the people for water. So if there are any questions tonight, we are looking forward to trying to resolve whatever those outstanding issues may be. As was stated in the agenda, there are really two purposes for tonight's meeting. One has to do with the petition and the zoning, which has been before you, frankly, since November of 2018. We started this by giving a petition which suggested the zone changes, or requested the zone changes, which would enable us to be able to go forward with the use that we're proposing for this project. If approved, those changes to the OB 100 district will permit the proposed school on approximately 345 of the 723 acres that are on the site. Importantly, this is done by a special permit, and it only applies to those 345 acres. So the zoning for the special permit for the school use is on that piece of the property, and on the balance of the property, the remaining acreage remains OB 100. So nothing changes on that property with one exception. We were requested to put in the OB 100 a change which limited, or at this point would restrict or prohibit, multifamily use on that site. So while OB 100 before we started, and as we sit here currently, would permit multifamily housing, we've been asked not to do that. We put it in, we had no objection to it. We know there's been some discussion about it. We take no position on it, but it is currently in our petition. We have some minor changes that have been made since it was originally put in. We were asked to highlight those this evening. In response to certain comments from certain town officials, we did change the required setbacks so that the school use must be set back from the perimeter property lines the same distance as was required of IBM. We had it a larger distance. Actually, a larger distance at one point. We made it the same distance now. We were requested to do that. We had no objection. The language reflects that now. We also, as I mentioned, clarified the language that we were talking about a moment ago with regard to multifamily housing. We were asked to make the language a little stronger, and we did that as well. We had no objection. So those are the two items that have been changed with regard to the petition. And of course, again, if there are any questions with respect to the petition, we'd be happy to try to answer those this evening. The second purpose of the meeting is to discuss, as Saret had mentioned, the environmental project assessments, and we are looking and hoping that the lead agency town board this evening will deem them complete and be permitted to be circulated to the other involved agencies and interested agencies to get their comments at this point. So what does that mean? And again, you heard some of the chronology. We started in September of 2018. You declared lead agency in October of 2018. We had a special joint board meeting in November of 2018. And finally, we put together a memo collaboratively with all of your consultants, et cetera, for the topics that needed to be studied in the project assessments. That happened in January of 2019. In June of 2019, we put in the first draft of those documents. And since that time, as you've mentioned, there's been a number of drafts that have gone back and forth between us and your consultants. And frankly, there have also been joint board meetings and other meetings where these questions have come up, and we've done our best to answer and to cover all of those topics. I'm not going to go through all of them, but to give you an idea, there's project descriptions, the summaries of the actions. We've looked at the land use, the topography, trees, soils and geography, water resources, traffic, transportation, demographics, utilities, water supply, fiscal analysis, community character, historical and architectural and archaeological, energy. All of these topics are the subject of reports and are part of the environmental assessment, and all of the questions we believe that have been asked, almost all with the exception that we'll talk about, have been answered to date. We have appendices that are attached to these documents where we have a traffic impact study specifically that's there, a biological assessment, a water supply report, a SWIP, which is a stormwater pollution prevention permit application, a sanitary sewer report, a lighting information, and sustainable design memorandum that was done as well. From our perspective, the highlights of the report are very simple. This is as environmentally friendly a project as you could have on a vacant site, as we are reusing the buildings that are there rather than taking them down and building anew. We have 1.176 million square feet that are being reused as part of this. We are simply adding 40,000 square feet to that very large facility where we'll be building a field house, because we had to build that for the athletic requirement. We could not put it in the existing buildings. In addition, there are some other very excellent environmental lessening of impacts that occur as a result of this project. We have decreased the impervious surface by roughly 20%. 51.8 acres is now down to 41.8 acres of impervious surface. And that, frankly, is a result because we now have 2,143 less parking spaces, because the use just requires a heck of a lot less parking than 1 million square feet of office and laboratory use that preceded us. So a lot of those parking lots that are up there in asphalt are being replaced by pervious surface. Since we put those documents in June, we mentioned that we had the joint board meetings, the submissions. We've had a number of other meetings. We met with the state and local police. We met with the fire department. We've put together a number of things. There are 3 items worth noting with respect to what will be added to the report. We hope this evening is part of an amendment. We have the receipt of the state police report that came in today, giving all of their recommendations. It came in this week. We have no objection to what's in that report. We will be happy to work with it, and we would look that to be attached to our environmental assessment. We are receipt of the fire district comments and report that also came in this week as a result of the meeting that we had at the site. We have no objection at all to the comments that are there, and we look forward to, again, working this out. I think you're all aware that we now have a security consultant on board who's been working very closely and will continue to work closely with the police and fire. And we look forward to putting together the final analysis of that for the school, because safety is a primary issue for all of us. And finally, one little technical item. Woodward and Curran has asked us to commit to a soils handling plan, which we will absolutely do. We have no problem doing that, and we will be putting that also, putting that as an amendment that we will put through before you will be making your final decisions. So, with that said, that is where we are in the process, and at this point, what we look forward to are hearing from the boards as to whatever questions that you have that still remain, so that we can do this. So the process, so that you understand it, is once you would deem it complete, then you would be directing the circulation of all of the EAF and these reports to the agencies, so we could be able to set a public hearing on the zoning amendment. And the town board could go forward with its public hearing on the zoning, and we could go back to the planning board also for a public hearing with respect to our site plan requests and subdivision and all the other matters that are before it. So, but the first thing we have to do is settle that we have a complete environmental analysis, and that's why we're here this evening.
Okay.
And that's our presentation. If you have, as I said, everybody is here as far as questions, if there's anybody.
Okay, well, I think we'll start, question from the town board. Mark, you mentioned about the state police gave recommendations. The only thing the state police gave was a 6-year
Well-
police response.
Right. But there was also, I believe there was some comments. What's that? Just the fire? I'm sorry, it was just the fire. So it was the state that responded to us, I'll apologize, responded to us and gave us information, and we will make that part of our report. But there were no comments at that point or
I mean, you would think that right down the hill from what's going to be, top-class school, they would have.
My experience with the state is they don't necessarily pay attention greatly to time constraints and periods, but you do get their information. It doesn't always come in timely. It doesn't always come in before you necessarily are at this part of the process, but you get them eventually, and they do require you, and we will follow their recommendations.
I have no-
And they did, by the way, come to our meeting, and we had a good dialogue with them with respect to what needs to happen.
So just on, and I know that you've contracted with a security company, because that was a question, I think, and concern the entire town board had. But one thing I do want to point out, and hopefully will rectify moving forward, is our town police. So we have a part-time police department augmented by the state police, but we rely very heavily on our town police. And according to the chief, he's had one meeting since
Right.
hearing about this. So I would just encourage your security to talk to him.
So it's clear, we got our security guy on board a couple months ago, 6 weeks ago. We immediately went to go get a meeting. We had a meeting at the facility with the fire chief, with the chief, and what, deputy? Assistant chief, I don't want to, with the assistant chief for the town police and a representative of the state police. All three met, we went through, we had our planner there, we had our security consultant there. We went through the entire plan and we're still developing that.
Excuse me, John, was representative of the police department there?
Chief Driscoll was there, and
Okay, he was, all right. So but that must be the one meeting he's referencing.
Right, so as I said, our security person came on in the last 6 weeks, and we immediately went for a meeting with all of the public safety officers, and we're gonna continue to work through that. They came up with recommendations, et cetera. If you'd like to speak to John, he's here.
I was gonna say, just so everybody on the board knows, I've known John for years, and actually in the last year, I've gotten reconnected with him quite a bit. I was on the school safety task force, I'm on the transportation task force with the school, of which John's company is working with us. They do a phenomenal job. So you picked a very good company to associate yourself with, and it gives me a lot of confidence in what you're gonna be able to do from a security standpoint with the recommendations.
We thought it was best to select someone who already had the confidence of the town and working here with the school in the town and be able to utilize that, you know, that already that kind of experience.
I can't say
of
enough
ours.
good things about him. We had a meeting just last week, and they immediately came up with recommendations and things of that nature for the school, and I'm sure they're gonna do the same thing here, so it's a great choice.
And just one other comment that came to mind. Not the new school's problem, because it was IBM. Apparently, over the years, they heavily salted those roads up there during winter storms. So much so that the runoff from IBM campus, is the highest peak in town, has really got into our groundwater here. If you go into any of our public restrooms, we have to post a sodium warning that if you have any kind of salt issue, you should not be drinking our water here. And I just want to kind of highlight that with your water people.
That's the cause of it?
Excuse me?
I never knew
Yeah.
that was the cause of it.
Yeah.
Oh, I knew there was high sodium, I didn't know it was because of IBM daily salt.
It's a contributor, right?
Wow.
We are, our experts are aware of that issue.
So possibly less salt use up there, you know, containment of where it's stored. You know, once again, you didn't cause the groundwater, but we'd like you to not contribute more to it, that's all.
Yeah, we have a whole stormwater, and the entire plan has to be approved by you as lead agency. It's in there, and the experts have been looking at it.
Okay, Tony?
No, I think it was it. As far as, I thought maybe you guys can just revisit the setbacks that you referred to. You and I had a conversation, Sarat. And 500 feet, 100 feet, how does that work? How does that work?
It has to do with adjoining properties, right?
Right, well, it's adjoining properties
Well,
and,
what it has
Occupied.
to, no, actually, the perimeters are the ones that, it's like out on 100, for example. You wanted to make sure that there was an adequate setback. We were only worried about things like being able to put a gatehouse in the setback, because that would be, so we're setting the school, as you know, up on the hill. It's far back from the perimeters that we're talking about.
Right.
So it's just making sure that that nobody's creeping buildings down towards Route 100 or anything of that nature.
so from my, so from my perspective, I was concerned about the appearance, all right, and maintaining the appearance. There's 4 subdivisions, right, so Yeah, well, yeah,
What we did now, Peter Wise, by the way, what we did, Councilman, is we changed the zoning so that now the setbacks, like Mark was saying, from the perimeter, from 100, for example, is now the
Right.
same 500 feet that already exists today in the OB 100 district. The only difference is that setbacks to internal property lines, because remember, we're subdividing the site into 4 lots.
Right.
Those can in certain circumstances be 100 feet, but with respect to the entire perimeter, the setback is 500 feet.
What about where where you might be contiguous to a development, a housing, like a neighborhood? Property borders the neighborhoods.
If it's
So
on-
it's
if it's on
500
the
feet.
perimeter, like I said, if it's on the perimeter, it's 500 feet.
Okay.
So all you're doing is you're saying, here's how we're subdividing it, so when
And
we
so
have
that-
the school here, if we're gonna do something with this
That's
piece of
correct, so that
property, here's the different setback.
Internally, it could be 100 feet, but
Right.
externally, it's always 500.
Yeah, it's always 500 from
Right.
the, from.
Right,
But
exactly.
I want to be clear, though, it goes beyond the school, though. There's 4 subdivisions, right?
4 lots, yes.
There's 4 lots. I mean, we have the school, the utility portion, and then there's 2 portions that might be
500
developed.
feet.
500 feet in development lots as
500
well.
feet, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I just had a comment, just following up what the supervisor and Tom were saying. I think any problems you have up there that develop, and look, I've worked in schools for 40 years. I continue to work with them. I know high school kids. You got 1,800 kids. There's some things are going to happen, and I think that it's not the state police who are going to respond to that. It's going to be the town police. So I would say that's the crucial, and I think that's what the supervisor was alluding to, is that's the crucial part, I think, from the town's point of view, is the police chief on board with all that and have all of the plans been vetted entirely, and is everyone comfortable with that? I don't think the state police generally, from what I understand, they're a little understaffed. They patrol 684 and emergencies, but that will be a town issue. So I think that was the point
Right.
before.
And we did have your town police at our meeting, and just so it's completely clear, this is a primary issue. We did have the consultant. We're in a position where we're being asked to finalize environmental review and things of that nature more than, 2 years before we're talking about actually opening up the school. We've hired and put the security consultant. We've talked about the fact that our security plan, which by the way will require full-time security 24 hours a day on campus, because this is a residential campus facility, people will be living there. We're gonna have our own security on site, and they will be they're actually the first ones that are involved with it. But we'll have a whole manual, we'll have a whole security plan that will be in place that will be required to be approved by your town board prior to our being able to go ahead. We're hoping, for certificate of occupancy, and we will work that through because it will take some time. But we have started the process. We've looked at all of the basic outlines. We understand who are the responders, et cetera. And we have the right people in place, and we'll develop an entire plan because you have to have that for a school. I mean, no one's going to have their child living there
Well,
if
right.
you don't have that in place.
And things happen. I mean, they just happen.
Correct.
I think the point is, it's the local police chief rather than the state police that are going to be the key. He's going to be the key component.
But they were both there, and
Yeah.
frankly, it wasn't just discussion of police. It was a discussion of fire. It was a
Of course.
discussion of ambulance and
Mackey was there.
paramedic and all that. All of that has to be worked.
Yeah,
through.
it's all about public safety, of course, and especially given the climate today, whether it's reasonable, unreasonable, people are, very concerned when they send their kids to a school. And of course, so is the whole community for that.
I visited another client of ours this week, Hackley. We had a meeting over there, and I walked in, and all of a sudden I was met at my car by security officers that were in lockdown because something had happened at Sleepy
Yeah.
Hollow, and they had shut down all the schools in the area.
Yeah.
It just happens nowadays.
Unfortunately, yes.
Unfortunately.
So,
I'm sorry.
no, finish? Or-
Yeah, I had another topic, though, if you want to follow
Well, just on that, the document talks about hours of operation, which I thought was very interesting. Between 3 and 5, I think the kids are going to be allowed to come down into the town, as the way the document talks about it. So as it goes to the planning for security and the type of work that we're going to need to deal with from a police safety and such, I mean, that's concept. The second concept is, what happens on Saturdays and Sundays, and also on holidays, right? And I guess that becomes part of your plan. The other thing that I thought was kind of interesting is that there are going to be 58 resident staff by Phase 3. So they're going to be housed where?
They're going to be housed off campus for the most part. There are going to be residential.
When you say resident staff, I'm thinking that they're
Oh,
on
I'm
site.
sorry, the resident staff. I don't have the in the dormitories.
Dormitories,
You should
build homes?
By the way, I mentioned everybody that is here. Let me also mention that Tim DeCipio, who apologized, is not here tonight.
Yes.
And the second part of this is on the specific issues regarding the school. We had told you once before the new year, we are now ready to schedule a meeting for us to come in and just outside, environmental, outside site plans and subdivision, to have them come in and tell you everything you want to hear about the school now that they're putting together how the school itself is going to work and all that's going on. So within the next 30 days, if we want to schedule that also, make it a public meeting, he's ready to go do that. He's actually working, I was on the phone with him today twice, and he's out of state recruiting and doing the various things he needs to do, but they're ready to do that now. So we're happy to do that as a separate part of this
Okay.
review.
All right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So one of the things that we talked about earlier, and you, or the school, or Mr. DeCipio, were saying, those plans are still in formation. And on the report I'm looking at on page 8 of section Bonnie Von Olsen's letter of January 10th, just talking about the energy. I know that there are people concerned about that. This is a STEM academy. We had spoken earlier about looking forward to what sorts of ideas would be used that would be cutting edge, whether it be geothermal or windmills, I don't know, whatever it is. And I know that's an item. I wonder if you could summarize for us, or one of your people could summarize for us, what those, if any, alternative energy plans you had,
Right.
or if they're still under formation. I know that there's things in here, but perhaps that would be informative.
Okay. I will tell you this, I've already been in 2 meetings for a solar energy provider, and we believe there will be solar energy on this site. We don't know exactly, the rooftops there.
Oh, again, speaking.
The rooftops on the buildings look to be,
One would think.
very susceptible or
Right.
have the ability to do that.
Okay.
Me not being heard is pretty funny. But anyway, point is, I know that solar energy is being contemplated on and it's being discussed and negotiated, because I've been in a couple of those meetings. But I'll let Rich Williams talk.
Yeah,
to
that'd
her.
be interesting.
On the stormwater side, it's easy. There's a lot of green infrastructure.
This is
practices.
Rich Williams.
Rich Williams, I'm sorry, Rich Williams with Insight Engineering. Stormwater is one of the easier ones. We're implementing a lot of green infrastructure practices and sustainability practices on the stormwater side. As far as things related to the building, obviously, the interiors are being renovated. There'll be energy compliant appliances and lighting and things like that upgraded within the buildings. As far as renewable energy sources, solar is the primary one being explored at this point in time.
There's no breakdown yet, though, of 20% of it's going to come from this, or 40% is going to come from that, or we're signing up with NYSEG or some other company to provide all renewable sources of energy.
No, not at
We're
this
not
point.
that far yet.
No.
But is that a plan that you have, or a goal that you have?
There isn't a goal
to
or
maximize that? I mean, it seemed to be it would go with a STEM academy.
Right. There isn't a goal or target set, and as we move into subsequent phases, we're going to explore it in more detail. A lot's going to depend on costs and return and things like that, so we haven't established any hard goals.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
I also mentioned 2 other things. One is that there are some limitations on this that normally you usually sit here and talk about a brand-new building that's being built when you can talk about geothermal, you're building from the ground. We are dealing with existing systems and existing buildings, so there are some limitations to what you can and can't do, but we are looking to maximize that. And as you said, it's something that's going to be an expectation from our customer, which is the student, that we're going to be doing those things. So yes.
I would think that those kids would want to work on that, since those are a lot of jobs in the future. That to me would be a selling point for you.
Totally agree. We'll ask Tim, who will come to do that talk with you, to have a little discussion about alternative energy when he comes to address you as far as the school's concerned.
The project assessment talks about goals, and your second goal is to pursue the best possible environmental quality, promoting sustainable development and redevelopment through the use of low impact, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I think that's admirable.
blah, blah, blah?
Blah, blah, blah.
Is that the technical jargon?
Exactly.
But so it's clear, with the things like that you're talking about, like when we're creating the new residential facilities, low flush toilets, all of those types of things that didn't exist when IBM came in, that's all going to be included here. We are, all of those types of things, that's just standard stuff for new development here in Westchester. And that'll
You know,
all be there.
and that sort of goes to what the supervisor was saying with the salt usage and all that type of thing as well. You know, we're looking for ways to mitigate.
I think another thing that might come up is you're up on top of the hill. I saw in your plan, you say those fields, I mean, this might be for Mr. DeCipio and not you, but those fields you plan to have lighted, and light pollution, neighborhoods, that's, I'm not sure that's a topic for right now, but there might be some people, you know, say, wait a second, because we have a field over by Reese Park where we do light, and the upper part of that is not lit because going back, there's been a lot of neighborhood pushback, like, whoa, hold on now, you're lighting up the sky as it is. You're not going to light up the entire sky on us. It's just a concern. I'm not saying what it is. I just noticed that.
We have a good lighting story. Go ahead.
Oh, good.
I am very familiar with the lights at Reese Park and how visible they are. Those are older technologies. A lot of the newer lighting, which will be implemented here, is direct downlight LED focused lighting. If you want-
On the fields?
on the fields. If you want to see a good example, Horace Greeley in Chappaqua
Yeah.
just put in the lights that we're going to be using. Within our project assessment, we've provided glare studies,
I
photometrics,
saw that, yeah.
view shed analysis with cross sections. There is a tremendous amount of information in there to support the lights that we've used with examples and photographs of the lighting, which will give you an idea of how focused those beams are. And glare, which is actually a measure of impact to one's eye. So for instance, does it look like you're looking at a light bulb or a high beam on a headlight? We actually have a diagram that plots those impacts in there. And you can see that most of the impacts are focused to our own property. You will see some light from a distance, but it's not like we're used to seeing.
Well, that'll be interesting. Before you, well, maybe that would be a site visit, you know, for people in town to go see that new lighting that, you know, maybe people aren't familiar with and what that impact would be, because I'm sure there'll be some pushback on that.
Yeah, I had, when I found out about the lighting at that high school, I went and done a site visit myself, and I was amazed at how
Is that right?
focused the lighting is.
So there's going to be more, obviously more than one field up there,
Correct.
but you're not lighting all the fields.
No, we are going to be lighting the main turf field, which is on the western side of the campus, the baseball fields in the northwest corner of campus, and tennis courts. And I have to check, yeah, and the tennis courts. And the tennis court lighting isn't going to be the taller pole lights. The tennis court lighting will be 24-foot tall lighting, which is consistent with the other lighting on the site right now. Per the original design drawings, they're 25-foot poles. And we're going to have less lights, and again, current lights, which is direct downlight, 8 LED.
Yeah, those lights at Reese Park on the tennis court don't seem to cause a problem. Those are pretty new lights that we had a grant for. And,
There's no residencies around them.
well, I'm across the street. But yeah, those don't have a big, but it's when you're up on top of the hill with tall lights that you're gonna need for a baseball field or the turf field, for, I assume for football or lacrosse that are gonna be played, or soccer, that'll be played up there. So.
And it is noteworthy to mention that since we were last before you, there were fields on the eastern side of the property that were going to be lit. We have removed those. So it's only the baseball fields and the main turf field and the tennis courts.
Well, that'll be interesting to see. My other question is, as Anthony said, you have people who are going to be coming from town. We'll ask Mr. DeCipio about whether that's all grades 9 through 12 or just the upper grades of 11 and 12. That's a detail for later on. But you have people coming. Now, on your map, and you reference it in your document, that you have a walking trail to that. Can you just speak to that, where that walking trail is going to go through and what you envision? It's coming down over here by Bailey Court.
Correct.
Does
So-
that cross any other property lines to
So,
get to that point?
so right now, once you
Access over here.
once you get to Bailey Court, we're working on the details of how to actually get through Bailey Court and to the existing crosswalk at the traffic light.
But
other
the
than-
property there does border Bailey?
It does.
It does?
We have frontage on
Okay, I was
Route
trying to
100.
read that map before.
So,
Okay.
and this is going to be an unlit, it's just a walking path.
It's not a lot of road frontage.
No.
What is the frontage? 50 feet or
in that ballpark. It's not hundreds, it's 50 to 100.
Right.
And that is not lit. That would not be lit.
No, this is just meant to be a walking path. Again, the school's going to actually have shuttle service, but as we were talking, we heard that it was important to have some sort of pedestrian connection, so we wanted to be able to create a path that kept people off the main roads.
Yeah, I had an idea of along the road, which would benefit the people in the area over there as well as the school. Is there anything that you have planned that will benefit that area itself? The Lake Purdy's area and the people who are sort of around your school? My thought, as you know, has always been to connect the train station with your school, and your school then with the town along the road, not necessarily up over the hill. So is there anything there? I assume that the people in the area at the private school can't use the tennis courts and the fields, I would assume that, except obviously upon a permit from you and your own invitation to them, maybe tournaments or whatever. But is there anything that people over there could look forward to, or it's just a private school and...
I think the first thing we can all look forward to is the buildings actually being occupied and the property used. I mean, that's the easy answer. As far as sidewalks, we've taken a hard look at those. There's bridge crossings, there's limited right-of-way, there's a lot of vertical slopes. I mean, particularly we all know the one brick house that has the rock cut right behind it. It's not an easy stretch of sidewalk to construct. We did take a look at it hearing your request, and really it gets extensive quickly.
Did you get an estimate of the cost that would be? What is it, about 1 mile, I think? If I measured it one day.
This was a while back. I'd have to take
Do
a look.
you have any idea what that was, just for future reference?
We'd have to go back and look
As
at
I
our
go
notes
look
at
for
this point.
grants, this might be an issue I could look for.
I know.
grant about.
I know the town itself had done a study years ago. I think Woodard and Kern's office did, which included some green infrastructure practices.
Yeah, it's something we're interested in. If you can find that, it would be appreciated.
No, our traffic consultant is signaling me that it was $4 million.
That's for about, what was that, 1.2 miles, is that about?
Yes, roughly,
About 1.2, am I right?
yeah. $4 million. Well, like you said, bridge crossings, all of these things that went through the report, it was about $4 million.
Right-of-way acquisitions, I mean, it's not all right-of-way property.
Okay.
Any other- So we'll open it up to questions from the boards and committees. Yes, Bruce.
I'm Bruce Prince from the Planning Board. I'd like to go back. My questions regarding not necessarily the school itself, but the petition and zoning revisions that they're requesting. And basically, they're requesting revisions of the OB 100 for a school. Okay, which I have no problem with regard to that. However, in that request, there is also the request to eliminate multiple dwelling housing in that district. Okay? I don't understand where multiple dwelling housing had any relationship to the school. And as far as my conversations with Mark previously, they were very neutral on this and were asked to put this in. My information is, I don't know, why is that being requested? The area is zoned for all kinds of housing, and as far as I understand, I don't understand why it shouldn't stay all kind of housing and allow the school. That's not a problem. But why is there an elimination of multiple dwelling housing in this request? Can somebody give me an answer where that came from and why?
Well, I can give you one man's opinion. So this OB district was overlaid over an R80. Is that correct? Is that the underlying zoning district that was there?
Well, it's one of the principal uses that all uses within an R80 district are permitted in the OB 100.
Okay, but, so a standalone R80 is 2-acre, single family? Okay. Well, on that parcel of land, and taking into consideration what's happening throughout the town at this point, we just created a special zone, multifamily zone right across the street. So, in my mind, keeping the character, the rural character of this town, this campus abuts residential, single-family homes, and that's why I didn't want multifamily there. That's my opinion.
I was in the same mind as Rick. You know, we have a lot of the places over on the other side of town with the Muse. We have this place across the street. We obviously have a lot of right behind us here. And I think we weren't looking to just have a large influx of multifamily homes up on the hill right here in the center of town again.
Well, my question is if, fine, if that was the case, why hook it up with the school? Why don't we, let the school go through and then make a proposal by itself so there can be a public hearing with regard to the elimination of a type of housing that was allowed for the last umpteen years?
Because we're subdividing the property now, the school's subdividing it, so we're gonna do it now when they're subdividing it, not come back later. I mean, why wouldn't we combine it?
Right.
Because I think that's eliminating, I think it's eliminating a kind of housing that is becoming more and more popular. I have already mentioned to a friend of mine that when people are moving into Heritage Hills, a lot of young people are moving into Heritage Hills because that today in Westchester, it's almost impossible to get a starter home for under $500,000, and you're talking about in the zoning to eliminate multiple dwelling housing. You're talking multiple family housing. You're talking about 1 and 2 acre housing. You're talking about $1 million, $2 million, $3 million homes, and that gives a certain character to a
But I
town.
think if you look what we've done, and again, this goes farther back, and I won't speak for everybody, Somers has stepped up, and over the last 5-6 years, we've taken on much more of our share of affordable housing than the rest of the county has. I mean, if you look at the total number of units,
I know
we've
that.
done that by far. We've got the multifamily housing that's here, and I personally just think, at least right now, we have enough. I think we have enough. I think we have housing for all income levels, from the affordable housings up to the $1 million housing, and I'm trying to get away from just all of the houses on almost from like an open space type zone where you're going to cover it with multifamily houses. If at some point they start putting up the 2-acre houses, that's fine with me. I want to step away from the more congested houses.
So and I agree with these guys. When this came before us, or I was asked, I just thought through it like this. I said, well, I'm concerned about the appearance. I want to preserve the appearance there. So I want to sustain it in that way. I was talking about the setbacks and so on to make sure that when you drive up the main thoroughfares that you have that same rural look. I also thought that, from an impact point of view, this was probably the lowest impact type of development that could happen here, and sustain a business, okay, and sustain a tax base. And so this is one of the reasons why I thought this was a great solution, and I think most people here share that same thought. If we were to go down the multifamily, I'm probably sure that we'd probably get a ton of requests to put in that, because that's the easiest thing to do.
Well, yeah, but when you're talking about multi-dwelling housing, they're talking, there's a variety of multiple dwelling housing. The Boniello property, houses are selling for $800,000 to $900,000. This is not low-income housing or even affordable housing. It's the way of producing housing for a variety of residents, but it's also in multiple family housing, you're also going to have the same zoning, so you're going to be able to have a lot of open space that's going to be available. So it's not that it's not going to look like Route 6 housing. It's going to be, there's a variety. That's why it was zoned that way to begin with, and I just find it, I'll leave my statement, but I just found it to be not the way to go for the future.
All right, Bruce, so Bruce, I recognize that. Just, two things I want to say. I didn't say anything about affordable, equate those to, multifamily housing is multifamily housing, but it would just increase density and impact, as I thought. Look, as we move forward in time, anybody can come to us with a request, but in terms of, moving forward here, I just thought that if IBM was there and we were sitting here, things would be preserved as is. I like the way that looks. I think it's served the town well, and I just think that, putting that adjustment into the zoning, made sense. So.
Right, and just a closing comment on this, we haven't even finished building our multifamily residence in this town. Hidden Meadows is under development right now.
Right.
Over on Route 6. That's 53 units, I think, of multifamily housing. So we think we have plenty of them. Thank you, Bruce, for your comment. Yes, Nancy.
Nancy Gravino,
Mike?
I have to enter this conversation.
Just grab that.
Pull it down.
Is that good? Okay. I have to enter this conversation. I understood Bruce's question, but frankly, I don't understand your answers. I'm not taking a position, and the reason I don't understand your answers is because your answers don't match the facts. The fact that you're not allowing multifamily housing in OB 100 does not mean you're getting rid of multifamily housing. We have 2-acre zoning elsewhere, and we can still do multifamily housing there. So you haven't really erased it, correct? You've only erased it in OB 100. Do I
Yes.
understand that correctly?
Yes,
I haven't misunderstood anything.
that's correct.
All right, so what you did was you said only on those OB 100 parcels in the center of town. Just there, nowhere else. Do we have OB 100 anywhere else in town?
Not that I know of.
Yeah, I didn't, you scratched my brain, I couldn't come up with any. Can it exist anywhere else in town? Okay. Now I'm gonna ask you, would you please be honest and say the real reason you don't want the multifamily housing has nothing to do with open space? It remains 2-acre zone. So that means you're gonna have a house on every 2 acres that's buildable. So it doesn't impact open space. What it impacts is how much tax money you get. You're concerned about a reduction in revenue from taxes, am I correct?
Well, I'm
That's it.
concerned
That was
about
not even a
preserving a tax
consideration
base.
about
but-
taxes.
Not if they were fee simple, multifamily.
I agree, but we were told at our planning board meeting that by your attorney who represents us, because I asked that question, oh, you can't have a condo, well, why can't you have fee simple? Because the taxes are better there, and he said, no, you can't have if they do away with the condo, you can't have the fee simple. So I'm not a lawyer enough to cut through this.
Yeah, there's other places, fee simple condos, yeah.
No, I'm talking about OB 100. You're getting rid of multifamily housing only in OB 100. I want to make sure I understand that. But you can build homes there.
Correct.
If you don't do this, it simply means you can still build a house for every 2 acres, but you can cluster them. You just don't want clustered homes. Is that correct?
I'm not,
Be a case-by-case answer.
We don't want multifamily homes being built right across the street from
The other
a brand-new
question.
development that just is in the process of getting, not even built yet.
Well, when you argued that, when you argued Gus Boniello's,
Done yet.
you tried to get him fee simple, and he wouldn't
Sure.
do that.
Guilty.
Guilty, right. The reason is you get more money with a fee simple as a rateable than you do with a condo. All I'm trying to get you to do is to admit why you don't want multifamily housing. You're not reducing the amount of housing. You're still gonna have the same number of houses. We're not talking about low-cost housing.
No, but I'm not sure I follow why I'm gonna have the same number of housing. I'm
Yeah,
gonna have
allow
I'm gonna
multifamily
have a
housing.
different appearance. I was thinking it from an appearance point of view.
From an appearance.
Yeah,
You
I
don't
mean-
want houses attached.
Yeah.
But why would you have, I mean, if you were.
Well, you don't want houses attached.
maybe
We
getting off
just
topic
did Cobbly
we got-
Rock,
but-
which is 3-acre zoning, and they're gonna cluster, and those houses are not going to be attached.
But what's the,
Well-
what's?
Well, let me
what's the
say
point?
this.
I don't wanna waste any.
I didn't weigh in on that. That's not part of something I did. I may or may not agree with that. I don't think the tax thing is what the issue is
No.
for some of them, though. I've never seen that discussion, you know. I think it's more on what they think is simply appropriate to the area. I may or may not agree with that, but I don't really think it's about the tax implication. There was a discussion with Boniello about that, which had pluses and minuses. You know, and one of the pluses is if there's a condo, you get the Chicos, and people seem to be happy with that. So that's always part of the negotiation. But I don't think it was about, I don't think I've ever heard, how could we get more taxes for something, for having one type of development than the other? I think there's a preference by some here just for that.
All right, Nancy, if you want to speak, you got to get
There is, no, my point is not that there's not a difference. My point is that I've never heard the discussion of that being the determining factor, is what I'm saying. And I may or may not agree with the outcome of this in the zoning, but I understand what they're saying, I believe.
Joe Barbagallo, Towns Consulting Engineer. I just wanted to follow up on something that Nancy said about the planning board meeting. So I think you said what you meant to say. I just want to clarify it for those that were hearing it around what the attorney said. Because I think it might have been confused in the way that it might have been heard by folks. So that conversation was really about, as we're restricting the future, right? As we start restricting and saying it can only use that first use on R80, we ensued this conversation about condos and fee simple. And so what he was saying is we can't just say, if you want to do multifamily, it has to be fee simple and it can't be condo. That was the distinction that he said we couldn't make. I just wanted to make sure that was clear, because when I heard it just now, I suspected that it might have been unclear to folks, so I just wanted to clarify that. It was,
The only time you
None of
can
that
do
was
it
in my mind.
is when it's subject to rezoning, because then the town board has discretion. But you're right, if it's as of right, the town does not then have the ability to restrict something to just be simple. It can be condo as well.
that's what he meant. I
So
just
he
wanted
was
to
just
clarify.
clarifying that.
Thank you.
But we may go back to the part that is being built.
Yeah, let's.
About the school. Well, we do that.
Vicky.
Hi, Vicki Gannon from the Planning Board. And excuse my laptop, I'm looking at the petition and zoning change. In the section 17-92A, the additional language, it's spelling out who might live on the campus. So just to read it, so we're all on the same page, on a lot of 250 acres or more, a special exception use permit may be granted after a public hearing by the town board for a private for-profit institution of secondary learning with classroom, service, and administration buildings, dormitories for students, living quarters for custodians or caretakers of the on-site facilities. So custodians or caretakers of the on-site facilities, art center, head of school residence, and customary indoor and outdoor recreation and athletic facilities such as playfields, blah, blah, blah.
It goes to my question, right?
Right. So, and because when you brought that up, so my question had been, in this, you're starting to enumerate the duties of those people who would be living there, custodians or caretakers. It's my recollection, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that at the site visit, that we heard that there might be some faculty living there. And I would say, as you look at how you write the statute, when you start to enumerate it, do you write it too narrowly if you start to list people but don't list everybody you want? So just as it might be a little too narrowly drawn. I'm not an attorney, but just looking at it, I would say maybe caution. And the other thing is, as far as, and I think maybe I lose the plot on this, as far as the headmaster residence, I thought that the last time I asked that it wasn't going to be, but it's listed here. Is it a later stage, or has it been taken off the table? And if so, does it remain in here?
Currently, there's no plan for it. We didn't take it out. It's not impossible that it would come at some point, but right now, there's no plan for a headmaster.
So you hold it in here in the event it's necessary?
Right, but we're not, currently, there's no proposal for it, but yes, it's included as a possibility in the zoning.
Okay, so that was just what had caught my eye in it in terms of, for consistency's sake. And just as a matter of public policy and my understanding of things, I think that a subdivision occasions the review of the zoning, and it is completely appropriate to revisit the zoning and for the town to rethink and make those changes at the time. I personally, I am also on the planning board, don't see a problem with that at all. Just want to say that for the record.
Good.
Thank you.
That's helpful.
Thank you.
In that listing, custodian would be a teacher, though. They have custodial care, custodial duties. So it's not custodian like we think of. Isn't that anyone who has the duty to care in that? Isn't that require that, or is that not the legal term for it?
We'll take a look at the language and see. It could be an employee of the school. The purpose
That's
is
how I
the
take it.
people who are living there are going to be living there for a purpose. They're going to be
Right.
teachers that are going to be living as, residents at the dormitories because there's required to be supervision. We'll go back through that and make those changes.
So that goes to that original question. There's going to be about 58 people that are going to be, resident staffs. How are you contemplating housing them as this thing rolls forward?
Right. So perfect question to ask Mr. DeCipio at his.
Okay.
And we will.
And we'll make sure he answers it.
Oh, and excuse me, the other question is that the FAR is labeled as TBD, to be determined. At what point do we get an FAR calculation for the end of it?
We now know what the field
Okay.
house is like.
So, yeah, to amend that for the.
Right. When that language came in, we did not know exactly what was being built at the field house. We'll be able to do that now, and we'll fill that in.
And that speaks to completeness and
Yes.
readiness for review.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I mean, just in terms of size and scale, it also says there's going to be about 393, full-time, people working up there. So, as a town, it's pretty vibrant. I mean, there's businesses, there's people coming in and out. I think it just adds to the commercial viability of the whole area. So, with one of the lowest impacts, I think. Okay.
Yeah, any other, yeah, come on.
Hello, everybody. Don Bleza with the Energy Environment Committee. I just had a couple of questions, which may not be fully worked out, but the new building, which is going to be the athletic building, approximately 35,000 square feet. Is that accurate? Is that accurate? Footprint, right. You're looking at solar, you said, trying to decide if that would,
We're actually looking at solar for the entire.
for all the other structures as well. That's great. The, obviously it's an iconic campus. So the new building is gonna be the only new structure. Seeing that you're gonna be an elite, first-rate, cutting-edge facility for education, for kids all over the world are going to come here. I know it mentions in the prospectus that you're seeking LEED possibilities for the buildings. I know there are a lot of, I guess it'd be fair to say that LEED certification is probably like the accepted standard for, state-of-the-art energy-efficient design. Do you know where you are in that process?
So I think what's intended is possibilities are going to be explored, but as far as an official recertification, right now we may not be pursuing that. There's a lot of existing infrastructure in that building, which to start removing it all and replacing things probably wouldn't be feasible. So.
I'm speaking of the new building, the new athletic, right? The new athletic building, which I think obviously is going to have a whole new footprint. It's going to be on this iconic campus. I would think you would have the wherewithal to get some kind of LEED status, which I think would be notable for the school to say we're building a new building on this beautiful iconic structure. Be nice to say we got LEED, gold, silver. The minimum one is LEED.
Hi, I'm Travis Schnell with KG&D Architects, and we haven't really decided yet on the LEED certification. Now, usually when we're building schools everywhere, we don't always go after LEED certification, but the buildings that are redesigning, they meet certification. Usually the local school boards, they just don't want to go the extra effort in paying for the certification because it's a huge cost. In this case, we have to have further conversations with the owner on if that's something they want to pursue or not, and if that's something they want to include in marketing, material, etc.
When Mr. DeCipio comes back, would he be able to answer those questions?
He'd be one of the people, but it would also be reviewing with Sebastian Capital.
Right.
Yeah, I guess factoring into the cachet of the LEED rating, I'm assuming it's going to have the state-of-the-art things, whether it's geothermal, but if you can have some combination, I just thought it would be something to seek. Thank you.
Thank you, Don.
I just wanted to mention that it's a question that we hadn't been asked. We'll get you an answer. We'll look into that. We take the field house very seriously. That is one of the things we've engaged the IMPay group to. They are our consultants with our architects with respect to the field house to make sure that it fits into the campus and it's appropriate, et cetera.
It's going to get a lot of scrutiny, that
it certainly
field
will.
house.
So we're taking it very seriously. But the issue of whether or not, again, it's very different whether it's LEED certifiable or LEED certified, whether you go through the process. But we'll talk to our client about that and we'll get you an answer on that question.
I think the point of that is the more that we can reduce the carbon footprint, the Energy Environment Committee that Don heads up was founded as part of ICLEI way back in 2009, I believe, along with the County of Westchester to reduce the carbon footprint, in town and of course all across the county. And being right near 684, much of the carbon in town, and they've measured it, and that we have an ongoing measurement of the carbon in town. Much of it, or most of it perhaps, comes from cars, and especially 684. And that's a sensitive area up there. And it would be interesting to know, you have, 20% of the cars perhaps, you had 3,000 parking spaces, now you're talking about 600 and something, but it's a full 24/7 operation. So you're just trying to balance out what is the carbon effect of the campus. And I think that's the point that Don is getting at there, is just trying to figure that out and reduce it as much as possible, especially in a STEM academy.
And it's going to be a beautiful building, I'm guessing. I just want to make sure that the Somers basketball team will have an advantage if they play the other team in the academy.
There you go.
Not the Vikings?
Thanks again.
Not the Vikings?
Yeah, Mike.
Hi, I'm Michael Barnhart, Chair of the Somers Open Space Committee, and Bob McGregor, who's also on the Open Space Committee. Actually, we came out in force. There are several members in the back. The first thing I think we wanted to say was that we were actually quite pleased with what we saw in the revised proposal here. Quite a number of the things we raised previously were addressed, and we thought addressed quite well. So we have just some niggling details that we had some questions about, and that's about it. But in general, we think that it's quite innovative. I noted when I looked at the plans this afternoon, the amount of green infrastructure, the number of rain gardens that are being incorporated into the stormwater plan and so forth, and these are quite good. We always were very happy with the reduction in the impervious surface, which of course is going to contribute to preventing the sort of runoff and so on that has led to problems with sodium and phosphorus and so forth. So we're very pleased with it in general. So these are just a few things that we noted, and that, they may not necessarily all have to be addressed from our point of view in order for the proposal to be complete. We might want to address them in the review of the site plan itself later. They were in no particular order. First off, while we understand that you don't want to remove all the invasive plants on site, and we certainly sympathize with you because it's an enormous undertaking, we've tried it ourselves in various places, we would suggest we'd like to see some sort of plan regarding how you're going to dispose of, remove and dispose of the invasives that are on site, that you intend to remove. The problem, of course, is that invasives, when they get moved somewhere else and deposited, can then, proliferate at the new site. The other issues had to do essentially with the fact that, as I think I noted when we were here before, the site has been very underutilized, virtually vacant for quite some time now, which means that you can expect that small mammal, amphibian, and reptile populations have probably increased rather dramatically on the site, and there's quite a number. If you look at the plans, you'll see there's quite a number of the existing conditions. You'll see there are quite a number of existing wetlands, some of them constructed, some of them natural. So what you can expect that there's probably a larger number of amphibians and reptiles on the site than would otherwise be the case if it had been actively used. So, and Beth Evans had noted in her biological assessment that this might be the case too. So there were a couple of things. Obviously, that doesn't mean you shouldn't use the site, but I think there are a number of things we might do to try to protect it, particularly because another thing we were very pleased with, you designated the wet meadow in the northeastern section of the buildable area as a living laboratory, which was also her suggestion, and we endorsed that last time we were discussing this. So we think that's a great thing, but we'd like to protect what might be in that living laboratory as much as possible. So I think the thing that, one thing that I noted was you said that we had asked for Cape Cod curbing. It's a particular profile, very low profile that amphibians and reptiles can easily navigate. And it's extremely important because in your stormwater plan, though you do have quite a number of rain gardens and so forth, it's going to be a much better stormwater pollution prevention plan than what was there before. You're still going to have things like hydrodynamic separators and so forth. These are lethal for reptiles, snakes and salamanders and things like that. So having the curbing so they're not channeled into these things is really important, because if they run up against curbing, they can't get over. They're going to just follow along the curbing, and if that leads to, a catch basin or something, they're done. So the curbing is really important. Now, you had said you would review the curbing details to determine whether amphibians could navigate them, but it wasn't clear to me exactly what sort of process that was going to involve, and we would just suggest that wherever in particular you're replacing curbing or adding curbing, that you make it Cape Cod style. The other thing we would urge is that as you design these, as you place these separators and things like that, or or grade around them, that you try to use swales to encourage animal movement away from them as much as possible. We realize that may not be always possible. Also, with regard to the light, as that came up before, I was actually really impressed with the lighting plan for this, and I think it is very innovative. And I have seen the lights down in Horace Greeley, and they're a vast improvement over what you normally find. We are talking, though, as I recall, about 70-foot light poles near the baseball field, if I'm correct. And the glare study showed some spillage over beyond into the wet meadow area. Now, I realize that you can't prevent all spillage and so forth, but it's spillage at a level, I think you said, between 25,000 and 15,000 Candelaria, which has been documented to attract amphibians. So if there are salamanders in that, they are going to be drawn towards the light. So what we would want you to do, now Beth had suggested you put a fence up, and it's on the plans, and we're really glad of that. It's a chain link fence, but salamanders are really little, and they can go through the links in the chain. So what we would suggest is that you put some kind of solid barrier at the bottom of the fence. I think the chain link fence is fine, but have some sort of solid barrier, plastic barrier or something like that, incorporated into the fencing so that you prevent them moving onto the field, because I think they will. Again, the whole idea is to try to reduce mortality and so forth, and preserve the living laboratory for the students. That was also a suggestion. So swales, what else? Also, again, you're going to have movement of animals throughout the site. There are roadways. There's going to be a lot of traffic. Obviously, there are going to be, instances where crossing frogs are smushed and things like that. However, it does help sometimes to have signage, because it will, especially in areas where, for example, frogs and salamanders are known to cross, particularly on what are called big nights, that is warm spring nights when they're out moving about. This would also be an opportunity for students to study amphibian movements and things like that. So, I would make a plea for some signage at known areas of crossing, and that I'm sure Beth could determine, and I'm sure you do have some that some of those road crossing areas. So those were our. Have I forgotten anything that?
The only thing that I would focus on a little bit further would be the removal of invasives. That we know right now there's Japanese knotweed just south of the Citibank building along Route 100. So that leads us to believe that there's going to be Japanese knotweed up on the property. Also, within the report, it does indicate that on Lot 4, you've got a mile a minute, so that you're getting a bunch of invasives, and there are probably 15 or 20 other invasives that are currently on the property. So the identification, the removal, and the proper disposal will be important, and that's going to be particularly true once you move outside of the ring road, when you're working on your cross-country course path and the path down to Route 100. So as you're doing clearing there, hopefully you'll identify where there are invasives, and if you have a good plan put together, I think that will allow you to go outside of where you might be doing construction to remove additional invasives, just to clean up the area so that you don't have ongoing problems. But invasives are prevalent throughout the town, and anything that you can do to try to promote and encourage the removal of them would be very helpful. So that would be the key point that I would like to have you focus on, is dealing with the invasives.
I just have to say, you two guys amaze me. This is my weakest subject.
Thank goodness for
You are my go-to.
One last compliment to the proposal. I noticed that you had committed to doing native plantings wherever possible and avoiding ornamentals. We really appreciate that. Again, that maintains the character, the natural character of the area. So we're very pleased by that.
Well, we appreciate all your
Yeah,
work.
thanks for your comments, gentlemen.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Who's next?
You and I were just talking about that exact topic.
Anybody else
Where?
from our boards, committees, comments,
Invasives,
concerns?
amphibians.
Okay. I received an update from our traffic consultant, and I noticed this is a January 8th letter to our town planner, traffic review summary, repurposing a former IBM campus, private Somers High School, Somers, New York. So the last paragraph deals with, they reviewed the site plan provided by the applicant and limited our comments only to internal traffic operations, including traffic control, signing, and pavement markings. The site plan does show some pavement markings and certain traffic control signing, such as stop signs. However, a complete pavement marking and traffic control signing plan should be completed by the applicant and submitted to the town for review. Just want to be assured that that's part and parcel of what you're going to do.
Yes, we received that today, I think, or in the last 48 hours, and we have no objection, and we'll be able to present that. Can I object to the protection of the snakes, though? That was the one place, that's the one place he lost me. I'm sorry.
I'm going to reserve comment on that because I have a million of them. I also just want to point out our fire district and fire department have put together a very nice presentation and comments. Is there anything in here, anybody from the fire department or?
I just had it in my
comment on?
hand. I was gonna say the same thing, John. It's a great report.
Thanks. My name is John Mackey. I'm the first assistant chief of Somers Volunteer Fire Department, Somers Fire District. We received a copy of the project assessment, I think Thursday. We came up with that in the past, pretty much the weekend. That's just, initial looking through it. Just a little background on Somers Fire District. In 2018, we were the 7th busiest in Westchester County. Out of all 58 fire departments, that includes Yonkers, New Rochelle, so we're up there. We're approaching 3,000 calls a year that we're answering.
That's without the school.
Without the school. The fire and EMS in this town is a very delicate balance.
That's EMS as well, right?
Yes. So there is a very delicate balance where our concerns are providing the best service to all the residents, visitors, and schools. So we want to, ensure that we can do that. We outlined some comments in there from brief reading through the binder this thick. But we're looking forward to working with everyone to ensure that, when this gets moving forward, that we have, some input, make stuff easier in our world, and that, the town board understands that, this is going to put a strain on our services. Any kind of development does, any increase. Even an extra dozen calls a year, mostly volunteers, is tough. We did a study based on the other schools in town. We have BOCES, Lincoln Hall, the high school, Kennedy, and, just simple math, we're estimating maybe 75 to 100 extra on top of, our already close to 3,000. So that is one of our big concerns with this project going forward. But like I said, we want to work with town board, with the developers to figure that out.
Yeah, just want to say this aloud. Tom said this, we talked about it with the chief, you're reiterating this. I think our public service and safety and service arms of this town are, expressing a little bit of angst because they're calling similarly situated communities and they're saying, what is it like, here? And they're hearing that, don't underestimate the challenges of our youth. That's essentially it. There's going to be more activity.
Yeah, that's kind of how we're looking at it. Well, it's great for the town. From our perspective, it's basically a small college coming in.
Sure.
You know, so we're looking at other communities that have similar sized schools and trying to, because we don't have anything. We don't have experience with
Sure.
a facility
Doing
like
the right
this.
thing, you're doing the right thing.
So we're trying to do that research and try to figure out, you know, how we're going to adjust to it, because for the most part, those buildings have been vacant for, I don't know how long now.
10 years.
10 years. You know, we are looking at how we're going to be able to fight fires in those buildings if, God forbid, we do have one. So those are all concerns that we're trying to, you know, work out before it gets underway, opened up. So, you know, any assistance that you guys can provide would be definitely beneficial.
I mean, you must be talking to the mutual aid, you know,
Yeah,
contracts that you have with the local municipalities, right?
Yeah, we're actually looking at having a special, we call them ESZs, emergency response zones, just for that area where, you know, if we have some type of fire in that building, it's already going to be a multi-town, multi-county response, you know.
Very good.
As we do rely on our mutual aid partners surrounding towns a lot. So that's one thing we are studying. Some of the other big concerns were the water supply system up there, because that's very important. That's the fire
Sure.
hydrants. Yeah, we want to make sure that they're working. The water supply system can handle the increased occupancy 24/7. That they're all working, since it has been, you know, quite a while that the building's been vacant. Stuff like that.
All that stuff will get tested, though, I assume.
Yeah, and we outlined that in our
In the
little
report.
report.
But the capacities are not in there yet for you to determine whether the water capacity and everything else. That's something we still have to determine. Am I
Yeah, I
right?
don't think the water.
It doesn't, from changing from an office to the residential, we had the MEPs look at it, the fire storage requirement doesn't change. So we have a 500,000 gallon tank on site.
So that you're saying should be sufficient.
But that'll be part of the technical review, right? I mean, that's what's going to happen here. We're going to put this out to the public, and again, you'll be able to go through the technical aspects of that. And I'm not sure how you're going to do that meeting by meeting, but
Well, I was going to just encourage, you've already had at least one meeting with the applicant.
Yep, we had a meeting on December 18th up at the facility. It was very productive. You know, we talked out a lot of concerns going forward. I think, you know, I personally got the impression that, you know, we're going to have a good relationship, that they're going to be willing to work with us, figure out those logistic stuff, you know, even for us, access to the facility.
Yeah.
You know, special events, you know, let's say they have a turf field and their big football games or graduations, you know, you could have a couple thousand people there. That's stuff that, you know, we want to try to plan as much as possible so that if there is some sort of emergency, that, you know, we can respond appropriately and effectively.
And John, based upon the breakdown, you're saying possibly another 75 or somewhere in that neighborhood. And I know the breakdown that you put in your file, there's much more EMS type responses than fire responses. So I guess my question is to Mark also, and what is your, I know you're going to have a nurse, but what sort of a health thing are you going to have up there? You're going to have EMSs or EMTs or?
I mean, there's a full infirmary. As I said, if you'd
There-
like, we can do, there's a full on-site. I think they said up to 8 beds. Is that Travis?
I think we're still working with their health consultant, but we do have a full health clinic.
Just use.
We have a full health clinic on site. That's the current plans, and it's not just a nurse's office.
Are those state requirements for private school, residential schools, or
I
is
mean, I
this
think you need a nurse. You
determine?
don't have to have a full-on health clinic, but it's something that
You
are
need
looking
a
to
nurse,
provide.
just as a school district
believe
needs
so.
a nurse, but you don't have to provide the other
But the
services.
full-on health clinic could possibly help reduce some of the calls
I
that you
would
might
think.
have for an EMT,
Yeah.
hopefully.
There's no question, and there has to be places, they were telling us as we were walking through, where there's places for quarantine when somebody gets sick,
Right.
so they take them out of the general population, they have beds for them to be there, so they're not next to the other students. I mean, there's also all these regulations that have to do with schools that are beyond. So for example, by going to residential, we're putting windows in now, that operable windows that you don't have currently at the office.
Right.
There's all sorts of fire regulations
right.
that are required for the school that's going to have to be complied with as part of the building codes and the building codes reviews and those licenses. The bottom line is we've just started this, and John is now on board, and we're going to be working to where we will be putting together this safety, for lack of a better term, manual that will have all of these things covered, and we'll be working with your professionals to make sure they're online and on board. The first people that are involved with this here, aside from the systems, are going to be the people that we have, the security people that we have there. They'll have to be appropriately trained, and in communications, we'll have radio communications that we had talked about in our meeting. We will be able to access that for when we have to go off to the to your professionals for response.
Yeah, and so at one point, I mean, you're going to want to coordinate with the local hospitals. I'm sure you're going to do
Absolutely.
all that,
Well, I
right?
was going to ask that question.
Yeah.
We have a newly installed White Plains Urgent Care right in the Somerstown Shopping Center. Do you foresee a relationship with that facility?
Sure. What I foresee is, like with everything else, we got John on board. We're going to be hiring eventually the person who's going to be running the health clinic in the school. That person then would be the person who would be coordinating with your local hospitals, your local medical groups, and all the rest of that. But we're getting there as we go through the
'Cause
process.
I'm thinking maybe that would alleviate some of your EMS calls. If someone's sick, they would normally call the volunteer fire department. They can-
Absolutely.
That is a big concern, you know, those general illness, sick calls, you know, where it's borderline whether you need an ambulance to go to an emergency room or if you just need to go to an urgent care. So that's something that would have to be balanced. And
So hopefully the staff on site would be able to triage that appropriately.
exactly, triage appropriately.
But for now, it's like, who's your point of contact for security and safety? Is going to be Alteris, essentially. So these guys should be coordinating with that point of contact? Is that the thought?
Yes, we exchanged contact information. The thing that came out of this December 18th meeting is this report that we just got this week, and that's then going to lead to more meetings and more discussions and putting together the final outline of what's going to occur.
Well, I'm glad to hear that all
Protocols.
parties seem to be working well together and everybody wants to work well together. That's great.
Yeah, because
Does-
safety is one of our major concerns,
Sure.
obviously. We said that from day one.
And every
Security,
parent.
safety, right,
Every
and
parent.
your clientele.
Ours as well.
You're referring to requirements for those requirements set by the state education department,
There are
or requirements set by general law of the county of Westchester? Which requirements are?
Rescue windows and such?
All the requirements you just said that we have requirements.
State building code.
State building code.
correct.
Are there any requirements specifically for a private school? I understand the requirements of the
Or
state
any
education
school.
department for a public school system. I understand that well.
Up to the mic,
I
please.
just wonder. I'm just wondering if those are requirements you're thinking of.
The private schools, they have to meet the educational requirements based on the New York State Building Code. They don't meet state, they don't have to meet state education
Okay, so it is
requirements.
somewhat different, but the
Yeah.
building code is building code.
Yes, yep. So we are replacing windows and making them operable for rescue purposes on certain levels so they can egress
Sure.
out of the dormitories.
I just said, Mr. Mackey's comments and perspective is why these sorts of meetings with all of our people and everybody in the public who has a chance to weigh in, it's so important to see everything from all the different points of view. Whether you got Michael and Bob talking about invasive species and snakes or whatever, but they know what we don't know.
Exactly.
And the fire department sees things in a different way. For example, the state wanted to put a roundabout in front of our high school several years ago. We all had some concerns, but when the fire department said, wait a minute, that'll cut down our response time, and we're going to have to either go over the roundabout or we're going to have to,
Crush
do
it.
something. And that was a determining factor in coming out with what we believe is a better plan. Now, that wasn't the state plan. It was their recommendation to have the roundabout. But one of the crucial factors, along with several others, was a perspective that other people didn't see. What's going to happen when you have that fire engine come down? Sort of common sense, but it's only common after you hear that perspective. And that's why these sorts of things are so important, particularly when you're talking about public safety, of course.
Correct.
And just to elaborate, you're talking about building codes, fire codes. The Bureau of Fire Prevention is probably the experts on stuff like that. I assume they'll be reviewing all the building plans, stuff like that. And that's really where they're the people who look at it and say, you know, we need fire lanes here, stuff like that, to make sure from the town's perspective that new facilities meet all, you know, applicable codes, regulations.
I can assure you the Fire Prevention Bureau is gearing up for complete review of exactly what you just said. So, John, thank you, and very, very well done.
And just so it's clear, that's part of the site plan process that's in front of the plan. So these processes are all taking place, and they're all being complied with.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
All right.
Thank you. Anyone else here for comment? Okay, that's good to know. Well, I want to thank everyone here tonight for giving us your comments. I have not heard any information that has not been addressed that would preclude us from taking the next step. So, right, why don't you? I asked again.
It's all wrong.
I think I'd like to help the board summarize what we've heard tonight.
Why don't you do that?
Okay, I will do that. It seems to me there's a couple of items. We have the January 2020 document, and there's a few things that we already knew coming in had to be added to that to make it complete, and that includes the new fire report, which was not in there, and the new state police documentation. I had already spoken to Bonnie Von Olson this afternoon and suggested to her that not only do those just go in the appendices, but that there be at least an explanatory paragraph that gets included in the document itself related to those. However, tonight I think we've heard a couple of other things that the board has to consider. One, and I have to ask Joe about his salt handling plan. This is the first I'm clear on that. Is that something that you see needs to be part of this document for it to be considered complete?
I would say.
Did I say sand?
Salt.
Salt.
You said
Soil.
Salt.
So
You
that's
said
my
salt.
first question.
This is soil. Soil.
Talking about soil, the soil one.
So, are you talking soil management or soil? I was gonna say, this, see, I had an answer already for the salt. Right, so the soil handling plan, right now, we've done some testing up there. We've identified that there are colloidal soils, which we have to be careful about. Once they come in solution, it's like coffee, it's gonna flow through silt fences, and we wanna make sure that we prevent that from happening. Rich and I have worked out and started working towards the details, but really very specific to phase one. And we talked about how to address that in the broader plan. Rich and I have come up with a strategy on how to do that, but that does need to get added to the plan, and I think that was referenced earlier. I think for the completeness, if there's going to be a revision done,
There's a commitment to do that we put into the project assessment chart. We put that in expressly that we will prepare that plan.
yeah. Right, so what we talked about was that we're going to set the parameters by which the final plans, when we get into the detailed technical reviews, will meet at the site planning level, right? So for example, at the end of every working day, when there's rain predicted in the next 24 hours, all soils will be covered in some way as one option, right? Another option is we will create excavations in a way so that we're creating bathtubs, if anything, so that the water, if it does come in solution, is contained on the site. So these would be some of the techniques that we'll outline to set the guide for when the detailed plans are done in future phases that will review those soil management plans in the future against this criteria that we're going to establish right now. Because I think some of the future development plans are still, you know, from an environmental perspective, they're complete and ready to review, but when it gets to site plan, I suspect there will be shifts here and there on the site, and it would be a pretty big effort to go and do all of the soil management plans for all of the entire project now when we all know that the majority of it's going to change. So Rich and I talked about creating those parameters that we would view all future all future detailed soil management plans at the site plan level that accomplishes those goals of keeping all of that turbid water, if it does, either prevent it from happening in the beginning, but if it does happen, to prevent it from leaving off site. So I would say yes. Maybe I just should have said yes, but yes, it should be added, and we can work on some of the language
So
that I think
would
can
you
cover
consider
that.
this a minor
Right.
revision that you have an agreement on?
I think it's a minor revision, right?
It doesn't affect the completeness of it? It does.
There's some language
Well-
that I think needs to be added.
I'll
Right.
clarify where we're going with this.
Should I stay here?
You can stay there.
Let me just ask him a question first. Who enforces, you're talking about that soil and capturing it, who enforces that while this is all going on after a rainstorm? Just out of curiosity.
So as a routine matter, of course, Steve Wolfel, our engineering technician in-house, prior to any scheduled rain, he's making sure all the sites that are...
Okay, just as he would in the rest of the town.
Just as he would in the rest of the town. And he calls on our office to support him when necessary, and when things, on a big site like this, I suspect that might happen more than it does on the pool that's going in somebody's backyard.
Okay.
So just to answer that question, on the first two items that we talked about, the fire and police, just as before, there would be modifications considered minor in here that I would review, because they're in the areas that I review, to make sure that they meet the requirements. For this particular thing, they would make the modifications. Joe's office would review and make sure that they meet the requirements that his office thinks. So those are three items. The other item that I heard up here tonight, and then we'll go as to what the procedure could be or the alternatives for how to do that, had to do, of course, with all the things that the Open Space Committee brought up. And what of those are things that the board feels need to be identified in this document to make it complete? And I think we need a little discussion on that. I think they made very clear that the invasive species, treatment of the invasive species was something that they wanted to be dealt with. I don't know, I don't see Beth here tonight. Oh, there's Beth. So maybe Beth is the one that might want to think about this and help us understand from what it is that they discussed, what can be perhaps easily and considered minor to be put in here so that this document can proceed. So
like
that-
Michael was saying, basically have something in there that says, here's the invasive species, get rid of it, and what's your plan, how is your plan to get rid of it?
Well, I'm gonna let Beth speak to a couple of the points and what she thinks might be able to. Obviously, she's looked at these things, they've brought these things up before. If they're not included here, she may have reasons why they weren't included, and I would prefer if she be the one who answers
All right.
these things. Sorry,
Here she
Beth.
comes.
Good evening, Beth Evans, Evans Associates. I knew there was a reason I came tonight.
Yes.
I concur with the Open Space Committee's comments. Their invasive species do need to be carefully assessed and approached. You need to decide what your target species are. There are probably, they named 2 of the species. There are probably a dozen or more invasive species that are pretty well prevalent throughout the 700 acres, never mind the 300-acre site. I think respectfully the way to deal with that is at the site plan level, when we go out and we look at the areas where the path, the walking path is proposed, or as someone said, the cross-country trail is proposed. We look at that and we come up with a protocol as part of the site plan review for how they're going to be handled, how they're going to be removed, where they're going to be disposed of, how they're going to be disposed of, and how it's going to be monitored. It's a good opportunity, as the Living Laboratory Meadow is. It's a good opportunity for students to learn how species can come to dominate a landscape where natives used to predominate. So I don't think, respectfully, I don't think it's something I can summarize easily in this document, but it certainly is something we're going to look at as part of the site plan development, the detailed plans.
So are there any regulations already regarding this, you know, the disposal and removal of invasive species? And
There are, the regulations are slow in coming. There are regulations on what you can sell at a nursery or a landscape place. Right now, there are no regulations per se on disposal, but there are certainly guidelines and certainly PRISM recommendations for how to manage the species so that you don't end up making the problem worse. So it's a developing field, and it's an important field. We did see we reported the mile a minute that we saw. Right now, it's a small area, but if it's handled improperly, it could be a very large area very quickly. So it really is a matter of focusing on what the intended use is, how likely it's going to be maintained and managed and monitored, and then how to get rid of the species that are there. Some of them, I hate to be a doomsayer, but some of them I think are going to be part of our lives for a long time.
Yeah.
One question, did you find, or Michael, find any bamboo up there? We've had discussion about bamboo here for the last year.
I have not seen bamboo up
There are
there.
a lot of people who are concerned about
And
that.
you won't, because we have a local regulation.
But I did not see bamboo up there. That was one of the few I did not see. There's autumn olive all over. So if we say we're going to get rid of all the invasive species, we're not being truthful, we're not being straightforward. If we focus on the invasive species that are impacted by the proposed uses, great, we can get rid of those, we can monitor those areas, and we can keep an eye on other things.
Is there sort of a hierarchy of this got to go, this got to go, this got to go, this one, well, not so much, or?
Mile a minute sounds
Mile a minute
pretty
sounds
invasive.
pretty fast.
Mile
Sounds
a
like
minute,
it's coming right
mile
now.
a minute is an incredibly quick-growing vine. It is also an annual, though. So if you don't chop it into a million little pieces and take its seeds and scatter them all over, it can be controlled. But I heard Japanese knotweed mentioned. That's much more difficult to control, because if you just leave a little piece of that when you're trying to get rid of it, it will spread. So
So Beth, are you saying that in the site, at the site plan stage is when these details can get fleshed out?
it's really the detailed landscaping plan that will be reviewed by the planning board, I assume. It's really part and parcel of that. It's identifying, we've identified invasive species on the site. There's no doubt they're there. And we've committed to using native species to revegetate where we can. Controlling invasive species, really, in my opinion, is a site-specific endeavor.
So what do we need to do with this document with regards to
Well, we're going to
that?
hear from Saret. She'll get
All
us.
right, so that's my
thank-
opinion.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Beth.
Beth.
Just wait, Beth. Yes, dear.
Regarding the other items that the Open Space Committee brought up, that was, the big item. Obviously, things like Cape Cod curbs is a site plan issue. Looking here to see.
Fencing.
I'm trying to remember what these other items, whether it.
Comment here. So, you referenced it as a site plan issue. The stage we're at is this document complete for technical review? Right? We could have other comments come out, like during technical review, hey, let's change the curb to a Cape Cod curb because we've heard of this issue, right? It can start to become the development of the mitigation plan, for the lack of a better word, in response to the technical comments. So I think, as you said, there's certain information that's in here that is complete relative to what they're doing. During the technical review, we might have comments that result in the document being modified to say all curbs on site must be Cape Cod curbs. And then as an example, then when it comes to the planning board for site plan, we're looking back at that and saying, hey, the secret documents required this, and then we make sure that they're adopted, right? I heard the lawyer saying yes, so I must have done a decent job with that.
Okay.
But that doesn't affect the completeness of this document, which is the issue in front of us
Well,
right now.
let's let our
I'm
planner
just-
continue.
yeah, I'm just trying to make sure that
Yeah,
we
please.
cover all these issues.
We
And
rely
I
on
think
you.
I think we have from that point of view. So, thank you, Beth. So I think from the town board's point of view, there are those 3 items that we talked about. 2 for me to review, 1 for Joe's office. Yes, Joe?
Vicky brought up the FAR.
Well, you're right,
Yeah,
I have that on my list.
And
Me too.
The zoning.
clarification of the on-site residence as well, which was brought up by Vicky.
Right, well, that has to do with the zoning.
Yeah.
So in the zoning, there were 3 things which, again, the clarification of how they want to do the on-site residences, and not only the FAR, but the other 2 blanks related to the % of lot coverage. So I think those have to be in there to be complete. So we have those items. The board has really 2 alternatives in how to deal with that. It can basically empower your staff and your consultants to take the minor modifications from the consultants and the applicants, review them and identify that they are complete, and that you can consider, and again, Roland, please opine on this, that you can tell us that you are willing to accept that you see these as minor modifications for completeness. You can give us the charge to make sure that these modifications are made, and that once they are submitted to us, that we give our stamp of approval and tell you that we believe and that they have been made, that they can go ahead and publish these things, and we can distribute them as complete for public review.
So how? Okay,
That's one
what's it-
option, and the other, of course, is that you can wait till you get all of this, you look at it, and at your next meeting, determine it's complete. Is that fairly close?
Correct.
Okay.
I'd only mention one item, but more than just that it would go to your next meeting, at our last planning board meeting, they were ready to schedule the public hearing, but the public hearing is conditioned upon a finding of
Yeah.
completeness. So
Right.
that is, from our standpoint, the more critical timing issue as to getting this completed tonight.
But I think we're hearing that that the issues can be reviewed by our consultants and staff, and so we could accept it
Yes, you
based
can.
on they're okay.
Right, I haven't heard anything tonight that's, stop the presses,
neither have
let's table this and do more research.
And I'll just, for the record, I know that the supervisor read part of the FP Clark Michaelante letter into the record. But again, to state, there have been no traffic issues that have been brought up tonight. And he, as the traffic consultant on this project to the town, believes that the applicants have addressed all the issue and that it is complete with regard to traffic issues.
Yep, I read that.
Once you, if we take that first choice and you determine that it has, the requirements have been met to an acceptable sense, do we then review that? Does that present to us and we adopt them?
No,
Or-
you're basically
Letting
giving
you do
us
it.
the opportunity to say that it is complete. We can certainly take whatever the red line pages are that we get and submit them to the board, just circulate them to you and let you know that we believe it is complete. But in a sense, you're either empowering us and telling us if we believe it is complete, that we can tell the applicant that they can produce these documents for public review, or you want to hold off to your next meeting.
We're
Again,
ultimately
Roland, is
gonna-
that-
Well, question,
Yeah.
if we accept this for distribution this evening,
Subject to modifications.
subject to, right, how long, I mean, to move this project forward, we would need to set a public hearing
Correct.
as well. So, I mean, one of our dates would, our next meeting, scheduled meeting, or the second one, the regular meeting, is February 13th. Is it conceivable that we'll have a rendering of a complete document for a public hearing that the town board would have
Well,
by that date?
it's not a public hearing on this document. It is a public hearing on the zoning and on the comprehensive plan amendments. That's what
Those
your
are two
public
elements of
hearing
that.
will be on.
And that's the
Uh,
completion of
and-
the technical review. The completion of the technical review would have to be performed before all of that.
Well, it can be ongoing. You're not gonna.
Well, how about the planning board's public hearing? Can that then be scheduled?
The planning board will open its public hearing. That public hearing will go on for a variety of several meetings. And that, first of all, will not happen until there's several iterations of the site plan. You've heard about some of the things that have to be considered in the site plan tonight. We're not there yet. The planning board determined that it was willing to open the public hearing. It did not have to. It was not critical that it opened it. The applicant requested it. The planning board determined that if you accepted this as complete and it could be circulated, that they would open it. But by no means will it be the only meeting at
prevent them
which
from it.
that public hearing will
Okay.
Well, I mean, and there's two ways of looking at it. We can either empower our staff and consultant to do it, or we can say no, and then next meeting when they come in, we ask them, is it done? So, I mean, we're doing the same thing, we're just letting them do it on their own. I mean, they're gonna come in at the next meeting and say, yeah, everything's done, we're gonna say, oh, go ahead. So, we're just
So
letting them do it on their
I
own.
think, given that the amendments were, I think, in the minor
Yeah,
category.
I agree.
You could
Accept it.
deem the
Complete.
analysis complete, let it be circulated,
Subject to modifications.
subject to the modifications. You could, if you chose to, schedule two public hearings, one on the comprehensive plan amendment and the other on the zoning
Zoning.
amendments
Okay.
for either your February or your March meeting. You're undoubtedly going to keep those public hearings
Open.
open. One question I would have is whether or not you want the school presentation to be had, and it's yet to be scheduled, before you open the public hearings or after you've had the first session of public hearings. I think a lot of the questions you're likely to get at your public hearing are going to be school operational issues.
Right.
So it might be a benefit to have had that presentation before you open the public hearings.
And
I
Mark,
agree
you said
with
we
that.
could do that presentation pretty quickly, correct?
Yeah, I mean,
I think we were talking about doing it by the end of the month. I think, but you're not the critical time path at the moment, so, I mean, I'm listening to Surratt in the back. I think that from our standpoint, provided that we can get the public hearing started at the planning board in February, which is what we were looking to do,
And let this
it
go
would
to
be
March.
okay for this to go, for you to go to March, because again, it's just a petition, it's that we have to start working together with your people on the neg deck, which is not yet done, because that's the critical piece. You can't vote, the planning board can't vote, nobody can do anything until the negative declaration is completed and it's agreed upon by everybody. So that is gonna be what we're gonna be doing the last 2 weeks of January and into March, into February rather. So from our standpoint, if this got marked complete tonight and you were gonna be scheduling your public hearing with us for your March meeting, we would be very pleased with that result.
That's fine.
Okay.
Excellent.
And remember, you're gonna have a third public hearing as well. After the zoning is in place, then you have to have a
Master
public
plan.
hearing on the special use permit. Correct.
Yeah,
Right.
okay.
So that'll be the third public hearing.
And we need a second public hearing, as we discussed, on the
And second public
comprehensive.
hearing on the- you need two. on
Wow,
the
that's a lot.
Which is now why, when you're talking about a March meeting, you understand
Yeah,
that our
I
goal
understand.
was always the June approval.
One thing, Surratt, one of the things you listed was the state police, that you got the state police report.
Okay.
I would ask that we have a
So we're not
town
doing
police
the
report
February 13th,
added
so-
to this
Yeah,
too.
No, we'll do
Because we
it
talked
on
about that being a
February
crucial
13th,
element.
schedule it.
There was a small, if I recall, there's something that was received from the town police that is in here, very minor earlier. So there is something in here on that, and that's all that was submitted by the town police.
And I think the net of that was there were very few incidents historically
Right.
up there.
Yeah,
Other than-
that's a good idea. That's a good idea.
I have a process question. Once you're finished.
I'm
You're
finished. Any
So-
more, any
so-
more questions for me?
No, thank you,
No.
Surratt.
So I'm looking at section 2.2, involved agencies required approvals, and it outlines, the Somers Town Board has to do the zoning ordinance, right? Planning Board does the subdivision approvals, the site plan, and so on. But down on the bottom, it says Somers Town Board, Waterworks Corporation, Article 4. What is that part of this? And when do we, where does that come in?
I suppose that that's under the theory that we need to form a paper water district under the Transportation Corporations Law. That would come at the end. That would come
Exactly.
after the special use permit and during their.
They're not
Is
to be
that like a
concerned with
sewer
now.
district? Is that like a sewer district?
Well, except it's the waterworks.
Yeah, okay.
So it's
We'll
the
have a lot of
water supply
experiences
that's going to
doing
be
that by the time we get
semi-public.
there.
Right, because
Okay.
because the water supply and the sewage system will now potentially serve more than one lot. Remember, we're subdividing the site into 4
Right.
lots. They have to be public, and you can make them public essentially by forming these waterworks corporations and sewerage works corporations.
So to your point, there is one in place, but now that we're subdividing, we have to
No,
go
you
to
gotta-
the
you
public.
gotta have the-
Place.
You're gonna put them in place.
Put it in place.
But it's got the facility
Right
there.
now, those facilities are owned by.
Right,
the-
but
by
I'm saying the
owner of
facilities are
Yeah,
there,
the
but we just
facility
have to
there.
do it
It's
based on
like
a
what we
subdivision.
extend Heritage Hills.
Got it.
Right.
Right,
They're
no, I know,
paper districts only,
Right.
in case we have to step in and run it.
understood.
It's a backup mechanism.
Got it. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, so at this point, I'd like to make a motion to accept the documents as submitted with minor revisions,
That's complete.
and to be delegated to our consultants to get back to us with a complete.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. And we'll reserve setting up public hearings until
February.
our February meeting.
Just want to get it laid out to make sure we know
Yeah, we'll hear
which
back,
one is
we'll hear
when
back
and
from the
all that.
consultants and,
Right.
and it's,
Yep,
that's along your timeline? Very good.
You have somebody?
Nancy, do you look like you're? Okay.
Well, the gavel's about to
Yeah,
come
take
down.
Take a breath. We don't want anything to happen. I make a motion to, unless you have more, to close?
Yeah, any other issues or comments, gentlemen? All right, yeah, once again, I want to thank all our boards and volunteers for coming out, and the applicant as well.
I
I'll
need
make a
second.
motion
I made
to,
it already, I need a second.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Good night, Somers.